This week on Information Technology Leaders, Trish Millines Dziko, Executive Director of the Technology Access Foundation. Now here's your host, Laura Schildkraut.
Today's guest is the co-founder and executive director of the Technology Access Foundation, a not-for-profit agency that helps communities of color build futures through technology. Her first job was cleaning floors before college introduced her to the technologies. A series of testing and programming positions brought her to Microsoft, where she spent 6 years before starting the foundation. There are lots of stories about people who start out with little and then through brains, guts, and determination become very successful. There are also stories about those who have a lot, giving to those less fortunate. But it's far less frequent to meet someone who started with little, became successful, and then left it behind to make a full-time effort of supporting and enriching her community. This is truly admirable. Please welcome Trish Millines Dziko. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small beach town called Belmar, New Jersey. Population 2,000.
Really?
Yeah.
Did it get busier in the summer?
Yeah, it was a town where a lot of the New Yorkers would come down and rent beach houses, and the population went up to 6,500 in the summer.
Did you like it better in the summer or in the winter?
I would say the summer, just
Yeah.
because there was a lot more to do. Going down to the beach every day. We would usually go afterwards when you didn't have to pay, and we'd all hang out. And I made a lot of good summer friends.
Mm-hmm. When you were 13, to prove a point, your mom brought you to work with her. What was her job and what was her point?
Oh, man. It's an experience that will stay with me forever. My mom cleaned floors for a living, and I told her that I wasn't going to go to college. And I'm not sure in what context this was, but I remember that she didn't say anything. And that summer, I ended up working with her, cleaning floors. And she still never said anything, but I didn't have that idea that I wouldn't go to college anymore.
When did you first know you were smart?
Wow, that's a hard one. I'm not sure if there was any defining moment when I knew I was smart. I always did well in school, I always did well in math. I was an A student in math. I was, and that's in elementary school and on through high school. I had that notion because I was able to get into the higher level classes with help from some of the teachers.
And how did being an only child affect you?
You have to do everything on your own. And my mom died when I was 17 years old, so that year before she died, I spent that time taking care of her and trying to go to school, trying to graduate so I can go on to college. And it made me grow up very quickly. She missed my high school graduation, which was very tough for me. She died the day after Mother's Day that year, and graduation was only in June. It was really hard, but at that time, I hadn't quite turned 18 yet. And technically, I should have been a ward of the state, but my family let me stay in the house by myself and take care of myself because I had basically done so for so long.
Yeah, because that would have been pretty awful to have to go and live somewhere else at that point in your life.
Yeah, especially for a few short months because at that time 18 meant you were an adult, and to move me out of my home for that time wouldn't have been right.
What role did sports play in your upbringing?
Sports was just something that you do. I played basketball. I found out that I was very good in basketball and ended up getting a college scholarship. And I was the first one at my university, the first woman at my university to get a full basketball scholarship. So it became the vehicle for me to go to college, and it was going to be the only way that I could afford to go to college.
And what college did you go to?
I went to Monmouth University. At the time, it was Monmouth College. They became a university, and still the population isn't much. There were about 2,500 to 3,000 students when I was there, and there are about 5,000 students now.
Your original major was electrical engineering. Why did you decide to switch majors?
Well, first I chose electrical engineering because I like taking things apart. I took apart many, many things in my house. I did not get too many of those things put back together, but I was curious enough. I was good in math. I had to change majors because the basketball practices were the same time as my labs, and I couldn't afford to go to school any other way, so I had to find a major that was going to pay me good money, that's going to be something I was interested in, but at the same time allow me to continue playing ball.
And this was back in the 70s. Why was computer science an idea for you?
It was an idea for me because an advisor talked to me about it. I really didn't know much about it. I was your typical, in some ways, your typical geek in high school, but at that day and time, that meant you ran the projector, the tape machine, and things like that. There weren't any computers in our school. So when he talked to me about this whole computer thing, I kind of had an idea because I already had a couple classes under my belt and figured, okay, it sounded good. And it actually turned out to be the best choice for me.
What did you enjoy most and least about college?
What I enjoyed most is meeting a lot of friends. I met people who are lifelong friends. I had a lot of support from many of my coaches and advisors, and I actually liked computer science. It wasn't bad. When I got in the lab, it was great. Sitting in the class, I really didn't like it at all. What I didn't like about college was I think that it was such a small school. I mean, that was both good and bad. But when you're in your teens, late teens, early 20s, you kind of want to branch out and be in something bigger. Now, I look at it today, and it was by far the best choice for me.
Right.
Yeah.
What were some of the jobs you held during school?
Oh, I worked in the gym. My first job was the first summer of college, and I tutored a little boy in algebra. And that really made me feel good about myself because I had a challenge with math my senior year in high school because my mom was sick, and I was taking very difficult courses. I was taking physics and trig and calculus in that one year, and I didn't do very well. So it really felt good for me to be able to teach this kid and reinforce what I already knew while I was taking classes during the summer. I also was a chambermaid. I was a bathroom attendant at a freeway rest stop. I mean, I did everything. I waited tables, I cooked, pretty much had a job every summer, and also did work study during the year.
Amazing you had any time to really do basketball and everything else.
Well, it worked out.
Yeah.
It worked out.
How did your first post-college job come about?
I look back on it and I think that I was a child of affirmative action. I applied to Computer Sciences Corp, and I had the skills coming out. I did very well in college. They were looking for programmers. And I came in, I didn't know anything about negotiating salary or anything like that. I was so happy to have a job because I had taken that summer off to give myself a rest after that big accomplishment of graduating college. And once I got in there, I realized that I was not given the same opportunities as other people who didn't even have the degree that I had and who had basically graduated college the same time I did. The only difference is that they had gotten there about 6 months before me.
So how did you sort of work through that?
I didn't. You're young. I was 22 years old, and I didn't know how the world worked. I mean, nobody spent a lot of time with me while I was in college talking about how corporate America worked. And I had no idea what I was walking into. In fact, I never really got any counseling on interviewing for a job, doing your resume, or anything like that. I had to go out and find that information on my own. So for me, it was, okay, this is how it is, it's happening, I've got to do something different. And what I did different was I found a different job, got a better understanding of picking the right environment for me and picking a place where I could be successful.
And where was that second job?
That second job was at Hughes Aircraft Company in Tucson.
And what were your responsibilities?
I was a tester. Again, I wrote software to test missiles. When I was at Computer Sciences, I wrote software to test a four-face radar system. So it was in that military contracting, same language, which was closer to Fortran, but really wasn't, on those special military machines. And then it was my first exposure to paper tape. So I got a chance to learn a new skill. Overall, it was a good experience. It didn't start out that way because I had a supervisor that spent a lot of time in the Army. He wasn't exactly the nicest person if you were a female, and particularly if you were African American. He didn't really like that. So it was very difficult to get anything done, but fortunately I had a coworker who had been there many years, and he kind of took me under his wing, and I survived in that group. Then I changed groups, and life was much better after that.
What were some of the things that that mentor, for lack of a better term, did that kind of helped you get through that first transition?
I think the thing he did was give me a lot of confidence that I could do the work. When I stumbled on something, he didn't come in and yell at me. He would show me, you know, this is the way we do it here, because it would be something that I had already done, but they do it differently. And so he just took the time to work through it with me, and then just send me on my way, and you know, everything was great after that.
Did you ever make peace with that other boss?
No, I did. It just didn't seem like it was worth it.
No. If you could sort of look back now at yourself, what kind of advice would you give yourself in that position if you're working for somebody that just has a trouble with things other than your work performance?
I would say to weigh whether it's worth fighting a battle, and if it is, to really make sure that you have all your ducks in a row, and understand, you know, that it isn't you, it is them. One of the things I always say when I have troubles like that is that I'm not sure if it's because I'm a woman or if it's because I'm African American, because I've never been one without the other, so you just don't know. But one of the things I've always done is to look and say, am I really wrong in this situation? Did I not do what I was supposed to do? And if it turns out that I did everything I was supposed to do and what I'm doing is the right approach, then, you know, it's a matter of figuring out how do you confront this person, or do you even bother?
Because I guess it could be confusing. You know, you have all of those issues, or it could be that you really didn't do the job that they were expecting. So you really have to kind of hold up the mirror from a lot of different angles before you start pushing back.
That's the first thing you should do. The first thing you should do is look here and figure out, you know, is it really you? Because you don't want to start accusing someone if you didn't do due diligence.
Right.
You know.
Because also you can't unring that bell.
No.
Once you make that accusation, it would be very difficult to continue working with that person, especially with the level of maturity that someone in their early 20s has about how to handle those accusations.
Right, right. And it will follow you.
Right.
And it's not fair to the other person, and you wouldn't want that to happen to you.
Right. But you said you got a different job within the company. What was that?
I did. I moved over to the data processing side, and worked on programs to help the word processing team keep track of the documents that we're working on, and worked a little bit on payroll. And the experience I got there was I learned how to run a VAX machine, which was like the hottest machine then. And it was my first exposure to the B programming language, which was the predecessor to C.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes.
That's okay. Most kids don't know what punch cards are, so we're even. What brought about your decision to leave Hughes 2.5 years later?
Tucson was a great town if, you know, while you're young, but it's only a great town when school was in session. So I made a lot of friends that were attending University of Arizona, and then they would all leave to go home, and there really wasn't much for me to do in the summer. So I decided that I needed to live somewhere where there was a lot of action year-round. I chose San Francisco because I had visited there for the Gay Games, the first ever. And I really liked it. I thought it was a great place, and decided that's where I wanted to live.
So you left your job.
I left my job without a job. Okay, that was my first stupid mistake. And ended up living on the street for about 6 months. And
literally living on the street?
Literally, I was living out of my car. It wasn't a pleasant experience. It was probably the overall stupidest mistake I ever made in my life. And I learned a ton from it. I met a lot of really great people, though, and I can say that as bad as that experience was, meeting those people made it something that, you know, I wouldn't take back. I met people who taught me how to survive out there with, you know, with nothing. You know, the places you can go to get something to eat. You know, and I had my dog, I had my cat with me, and it was interesting.
You, your dog, your cat, and a car. For how long again?
For about 6 months.
6 months.
Close to 6 months, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the worst
during
of this
the
is,
recession.
Oh, better.
Okay, so it was like in '82, and I had a job. That was
the worst of it.
That
Yeah.
was the worst of it. I had a job, and I turned it down because I didn't think that I would make enough. And I looked at the cost of living, I looked at what I was making, and just decided it wasn't enough. And you know, that was my youth, that was my arrogance, that was everything else put together. And I was so humble after that experience, and it totally changed who I was.
Mm-hmm. And what did you end up doing eventually after 6 months?
I ended up teaching at computer sciences, or computer learning center, and I taught assembly language, which I didn't like at all, assembly language itself. I liked teaching, and it was the first job I actually got fired from. Mm-hmm. I got fired because I gave people the grades that they were supposed to get. And I'm not talking about giving people C's and D's. I gave B's instead of A's. And I showed up for the next session to teach, and there was another teacher in the classroom. And I'm looking at her, I was like, okay, well, this is my class. I'm thinking maybe she got mixed up. And they said, no, the director wants to talk to you. And I go downstairs, and this is how they tell me that I've been fired. And it was pretty devastating. I was still young, and you know, I didn't really understand, but you have to bounce back from something like that. After the experience that I had, this was like nothing, really. And I had at least a San Francisco experience on my resume so I can go out and look for other jobs. And I found another job within a month.
That's a pretty awful way of handling it for somebody. I mean, as you start to go through some of those experiences, I think you kind of pick up what kind of manager you want to be and what kind of manager you don't want to be.
Yeah.
That's pretty awful to put someone in the position of walking into their classroom.
But, you know, when I look at it, they did everything that way. I just didn't know, you know, how bad it was until I was on the receiving end. And, you know, it's just the way it is.
And what was that next job that you found?
I worked for a company called Fortune Systems, and I came in as a tester. And they made the first desktop multi-user Unix box. So the machine was actually about, it was really about this big, probably twice the size as a typical PC now, but it was a big deal. You can put 12 terminals on it. It was a Unix box. It was the very first time I was responsible for a machine on my own after being on mainframes. Mm-hmm. And I first was responsible for testing the software that went with it. So there's like a word processing, a database, and a spreadsheet. Sounds familiar. Then I moved on to test the operating system. I learned a lot about management at that point because there were women managers there, and they saw potential in me and kind of took me under their wing and really showed me the way of doing things. They were the IEEE standards and certain ways that you do automated tests, so I learned that. And so not only did I come out with technical skills, I also came out with management skills as well.
So this sounds like this job was sort of a turning point for you, where people really saw the potential in you and paid extra attention to that.
Yes, and I think it was because there were women as managers. I really, truly believe that. And there were actually a lot of women in the company and we were all about the same age, those of us who reported to these managers. And these managers had experience at like IBM and other large companies, HP. So they came in knowing a lot, you know, and they took a lot of time with us. It was great.
You were basically pretty happy with this job. Why did you decide to leave it, and why did you decide to leave San Francisco?
Well, I left the job because they started laying off people, and it looked like the company was going to go under. And I wasn't really happy in San Francisco, you know, where I thought I would be. It was a great city if you're a transient type person. I like to make a lot of friends, and after being there for so long, I didn't really make any like solid friends. I played rugby there, I played basketball, I made acquaintances, and I just needed something different. Plus, it was a city, and it was my first time living in like a city, and it just didn't quite feel right anymore. And I didn't know where I was going to move, so I really was there probably about a year longer than I thought I would be. I had some friends who I met playing rugby, and one of them was in the Army, and she got stationed at Fort Lewis. So I went up to visit them for Thanksgiving in 1984, and I was living here in Seattle January 10th, 1985.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now this
without
is,
a job.
Yeah, that's where I was going next. This is
Yes.
what really surprises me. I cannot believe you would do that again.
Okay, but I had savings. I had already found a place to live. And I had enough money to last me 6 months this time around, which I didn't end up having to use because I got a job within 3 months.
Okay, and what was that job?
That was at Telecalc. And that was a small company that made they made hardware and software. They made something called a line scanner unit that connected onto the phone PBX box. And the PC connected to the line scanner unit. And the whole idea was to kind of track phone calls that came into call centers. So they can do forecasting for how many operators they need. They can do scheduling, and they can do projections on how much money they would earn based on the call volume and the sales and things like that. Great product. I was the manager for the test team. It was the first time I was actually a manager on my own and able to build my own team, and it was a great experience.
What did you like about managing?
I liked being able to bring in people who had potential and working with them. I had a fairly young team. Now, mind you, I wasn't that old myself. I hadn't even turned 30 yet. But I had a team of people who were, you know, somewhere between 22 and 25. I had one person who was my age, so we were fairly young. Being able to come together and build this stellar team and teach people about tests, you know, all the things that I had learned from my previous experience.
If you had to choose between hiring experience and hiring potential, which one would you do?
Potential.
Why?
Because you can do so much more with potential. Experience doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to do new things. If you can get experience plus potential, it's great. You know, it really is. But a lot of people look at experience as, you know, they're seasoned, you know, they're the best, but they could be seasoned in this one thing and never shall they move away from that one thing. You just never know.
I think there may also be some of that where the people that helped you along are so precious to you that I think there's a lot of you, obviously, that wants to really give back in that way.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, when you think about what I did in the 70s, technology wasn't really that big of a deal in terms of everybody wasn't using it. It was like this small set of engineer, math type people. And to be considered in that when there weren't many people of color and there weren't many women, certainly more women than people of color, I feel really lucky. And I feel lucky because I think there are a lot of people looking out for me. There are people looking out for me that I don't even know. So thank them. I have to thank them, whoever they are, because I'm sure there's some doors opened behind the scenes for me. So it is, I mean, it's really, when you think about it, when you see somebody that has that potential and can do well but didn't really get a chance, you know, I try to snap them up everywhere I can.
Now, you were basically pretty happy with this job, even though you did end up having to lay some people off. But at a certain point, you decided that you were going to leave. What brought that decision about?
Oh, that I would be next.
Yeah.
You know, it was hard enough really laying off staff, but to me, it didn't make any sense to stay. I would be next, or I would be left to do all the work that a full staff did. So I went out on my own. I had confidence now. I had some contacts. And I went out and started writing software for small companies to help them with like payroll and client management and things like that. And ended up picking up Microsoft as a client.
How did you go about getting contract work? Because you knew you weren't ready to work for another company quite yet. How did you do that?
Word of mouth. Really, I didn't know anything about advertising. I went out and started a business. I got my little brochure done and hired what was the popular thing, a voice answering service. Got an answering service, and then I knew a couple of people out there that had small companies that needed work, and it just kind of started that way.
From there. And then you got a project with Microsoft. How did that come about?
There was an ad in the paper, actually, that I answered, and I got there, and it turned out a person that I worked with, Tom Gamel, that I worked with at Telecalc, was at Microsoft, and I didn't know that. I had lost contact with him. And it was in the group that he was in, and they were looking for testers for a SQL Server. I had all this test experience and had more experience than anybody on the team, actually. and saw that they were doing automated testing. I had done all that. The only thing that was different was most of the people had more experience on DOS than I did, and they were doing this thing called OS2 with IBM, and I hadn't heard of it, and they had this thing called LAN Manager that I didn't hear of before. But all the elements were basically the same. You have an operating system and you have a network, and so I had that kind of experience, and that's what got me hired.
What were some of your first impressions of Microsoft?
Well, it wasn't that big at that point. There were 3,500 people. They were mostly white men working there. My group, I have a very old picture, I should have brought it with me, of my first group, and oh man, did we look like a bunch of geeks. It was, I mean, it was like typical pocket protector type, you know, and I fit right in, you know, and it was really bizarre, and I have that in my album now. And I still, you know, communicate with a lot of those people. Some of them have left Microsoft, and you know, some of them are still there. But my first impression, it was very white, very male. And the other thing was that there were a lot of smart people. And so there was that moment for me of, do I really belong here? I knew I belonged there, but I just had that, you know, that one thing inside my heart that says, are you sure you can keep up with these people? Because, you know, in my mind, these people were like geniuses. They're very, very smart people doing things that I had no experience doing. And what I didn't value at the time was I had different experience in a different environment. But when we all came together, we had one assignment, and we all had to do it with the experience that we brought to the table. And once I started gaining my confidence, it didn't feel so bad being amongst all these people because I belong there.
Yeah. When you stop waiting for the smart police to come and say, hey, wait a minute, you don't belong here.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, you can get a lot done. Were you still coding at this point, or were you doing more design work?
I was still coding because I had to write tests for the engine. So I learned the scripting language for OS2. I wrote the first bug tracking database using our own product. I did that in C, and a character-based front-end tool called Cscape, which I'm sure doesn't exist anymore now that there's Windows. So I did all that. So I was able to maintain my coding skills, but at the same time, I started learning a little bit about design and how you define products, particularly for commercial use.
So after being a contractor for a while, you decided to sign on with Microsoft as a blue badge.
As a blue badge after 2.5 years.
An official employee. What brought that about?
You know, I got a chance to see what the company was about. I knew that I would get the kind of job that I wanted. I didn't want to stay in testing because at that point I had 10 years of testing under my belt, and I wanted to do something different. And they had all these different products coming up. The program manager of the group, who I reported to, was a really great guy, and I talked to him about wanting to be a program manager. And I really didn't know if I wanted to do it for the engine side or for the front end, because at the time the front end was this character-based thing, and this new thing called Windows was coming out, and we wanted to do a Windows front end. So I actually decided that, you know, I wanted to apply for program manager. What is it that I have to do? You know, what does the job entail? And once that became available, then it was time to transition.
Did you find it different working for Microsoft as a contractor versus working there as an employee?
At that time, no. I know right now there's a lot of difference, but at that time, contractors were, you know, just like employees in terms of, you know, having access to everything, being able to get on all the different group aliases and things like that. Yeah.
When we spoke before, you mentioned that you were already over 30 at this point, and that if you had started at Microsoft when you were younger, you're not sure you would have survived it.
Yeah, I'm very clear about that. Very clear about that.
Why was that?
I think it's because your social life in this day and time, your social life is also your work, and particularly when you're young. And you don't have a life. I mean, at the time, even though, you know, I had other activities and things, I didn't have kids or anything like that, you tend to bond with the people you work with. Well, nobody at my job had anything in common with me, and vice versa, really. And I don't think I would have made it. I really don't think so. I think that it would, socially, it would have crippled me, and I would not have felt comfortable there.
So again, you were talking about how your first position at Microsoft was a program manager. Can you explain what a program manager does?
A program manager basically defines a product and has to work with marketing, testing, development, user education, and support to get that product from the idea to a release product. The thing about being a program manager is that none of those people work for you. So you have all the responsibility of this product, but you have none of the control.
Right.
So you can't go to a developer and demand that they do something, you know, and expect that they're just going to do it. You have to be able to bring this team together, and when you have issues with that developer, you have to take it to their manager if you two can't work it out. So it's a different kind of position, but it is, I think if you want to be a complete technology person, that is like the best position, because you have to do everything from scheduling to designing to understanding marketing, understanding tests. I mean, everything that's involved with this product, you have to know everything about it, at least be able to understand it. And to be able to jump in, you know, my skills as a developer and as a tester allow me to jump in places where, you know, ordinarily I wouldn't be able to. Like I wrote the setup program, you know, things like that, so that I can, you know, feel technical.
Do you think it's important to be technical to be a good program manager?
I think it's important to understand technology. I don't think you have to be a technical person. You don't have to be a programmer. I think that I sort of equate it to being like a technical marketer, that if someone were to explain a concept to you and how people use a product, that you would understand that, but you wouldn't necessarily have to sit down there and hack out lines of code. But you would understand all the implications of if you add this feature, what would happen.
If you're not technical, how do you gain the respect of the developers?
That is a good question, because I can always tell when the developers were trying to snow me. I can always tell. And I knew that things were possible because I saw it done elsewhere, even with new technologies. And I could just, you know, challenge them and say, what, you know, you can't do that? What's wrong with your development skills? You know, I've seen it done over here. You know, so then it becomes personal, and then it's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to show her that I can do it. Yeah.
So you enjoyed that job?
I enjoyed it. It's probably the best job that, at that point, the best job I ever had. Yeah.
And during this time, you also ended up teaching software engineering at MIT. How did that come about, and did you enjoy it?
It was a winter, through their winter break. And I honestly don't know how it came about. My friend Marissa Martinez and I taught that class together, and she is a MIT alum. And so I think she proposed it to them that we come in and teach this class. It was for a week. It was 8 hours a day for a week, and basically what we did was we taught them how to develop a product from beginning to end, the whole spec process, the coding, testing. We did everything but support, right? We did documentation, and it was intense. It was really intense because we had to first sit down and figure out, okay, what can you do in that span of time that's going to be meaningful? And then secondly, we had to figure out how are you going to engage these very smart people to come and do this. And it was great. We had full classes. We did it for 2 years. We had full classes. And about a year ago, I got email from one of the students in our first class. And he said, I don't think you'll remember me. And I didn't remember his name, but I know I'll remember him if I see him. And he just let me know that he was at Microsoft now. I mean, this is like years later, right? That he's at Microsoft and he was thinking about me, and he asked around and people said this is where I was, and it was great.
That's the best feeling, isn't it?
It was so cool.
Yeah.
It was very cool.
Cool. What brought about your move to the TechNet group?
After 4.5 years in SQL Server, it was time to move on. It was intense. For like 1.5 years, I was working almost 100 hours a week. And probably the defining moment for me then was we had, scaled back, and I was working 50 hours a week. And I had a one-on-one with my manager, and he questioned whether I was still committed or not. And I just said, okay, gotta go. This is crazy, because we were getting ready to go in another cycle. We were moving into SQL 4.2 and a new operating system was NT at the time. And I knew that we were going to just start it all over again. I moved to TechNet to be with Alex Loeb, who's now vice president for the tablet PC. She had moved over to that group. She had an opening, asked if I wanted to come and manage the content group. And the product was just an idea at the time. It had gone a little bit beyond the idea and into staffing, and so she was trying to get someone who could bring in the content, program manage, as well as be a group manager.
And how did it feel to be a little bit out of the development cycle?
Odd, very odd. I mean, even though we were shipping a product, it wasn't really a product. It was a collection of articles, right? But there was a product that drove that. So I kind of got a little bit of that, but not much, not much. But it was great because I got a chance to assemble this team that's probably the most diverse team Microsoft had ever seen. And they're really good people. I'm still in contact with all of them. And we did some amazing work when I look at it.
And then after about 2 years, you moved back into program management. Why was that move appealing?
It wasn't so much the program management, it was the group. I needed to leave TechNet because things just weren't the same after Alex left. And I needed to kind of get back into the product scene because I really didn't know, where I was going to go after that. So I heard about the hardware group, and I had a friend that worked in that group as a developer. And they needed a program manager for this thing that's now called the Easy Ball, which is a mouse for kids up to 6 years old. And I thought it'd be interesting. It'll get me back to that hardware-software combination that I started out earlier in my career. And the group was a great, diverse group. My interview was really good. They cared more about me as a person. They already knew about my program management skills, so that was there. But so they asked the kind of questions that let them know if I fit in the group, essentially. Yeah.
You told me that after a few years at Microsoft, you didn't like who you were becoming. Who were you becoming?
I was becoming someone who thought they knew everything. I was becoming someone who cut people off mid-sentence. I was becoming that we got to do it now person. And we got to do it my way. And we got to do it this way because I said so. And I did not like that because I was not that kind of person when I walked in those doors. And I know it's not just a Microsoft thing, it is a PC industry. You got to develop it, you got to get it out the door because we got to beat that company to the market. And, it just wasn't happening. My life was about the product that I shipped. My life was about technology. It wasn't about the friends that I made and things like that. So it just wasn't feeling good.
Did you enjoy the Input Devices group?
Yeah, that was actually a great group. Well, he wasn't a vice president. He was a general manager at that time. Rick Thompson was great. I got a chance to work with the kids group. My manager was great. The team was really good. And actually, my management style coming into there didn't quite fit that group. And that group was really about being a team. And that's what kind of woke me up in some ways to the person I was I was kind of managing hard and driving, and that's not what they were about, and so they weren't responding, and I'm wondering, why aren't people responding? Had to look inside, I was doing things the wrong way. And I needed to kind of mellow out. And I did. It worked. And they sort of shaped me into this different program manager type person.
But still, you only stayed in this position about 6 months. Why the sudden move?
I got a chance to do something in the area of diversity. Now, my entire career at Microsoft, I had spent time going out on college recruiting trips, which is not an unusual thing for employees who want to go. But I specifically went out to historically black colleges, to colleges that had minority recruiting fairs, and went out to try to bring more people of color into Microsoft. I was president of Blacks at Microsoft for a couple of years. I was a member since the year it started. I was a member of Hoppers, the women's group. And so I'd done a lot of diversity work, and there was a potential for a position to open up in that group. And I went and talked to Mike Murray, who was the vice president at the time, and talked to him about, letting me change careers. And even though I didn't have that HR background, I had enough diversity experience that I felt that I could learn. I had potential. I could do anything, right? So they went for it. And it was hard to leave the input devices group. It really was, because I really cared about them. But I saw this as an opportunity that I couldn't pass up.
And what were the scope of your responsibilities?
Oh, what didn't I do? I did diversity training. I handled employee relations problems. I kept up with the recruiting, going out and working with colleges a little more intimately at this point. And I ran the high school internship program.
In 1996, after 6 years with Microsoft, you decided to leave the company. Why did you decide to leave, and was it a difficult decision?
It was not a difficult decision, only about when. I wanted to stay for the summer. I made the decision back in April of 96. I wanted to stay through the summer with this next group of high school interns. So I gave a very long notice, very long notice. I left because the work that I did in diversity, while I think I was somewhat effective, I kind of came to this realization that you can't change adults. You really, as much as adults want to change, as much as they want to be accepting, you're talking about a lot of unlearning, and you're talking about unlearning in the process of doing their job. And it's really tough for anybody. And my solution was, you have to start over. You can't really expect a lot of change among adults, but you can affect change through the next generation. So what I wanted to do was to work with a group of kids, teach them about technology, not just to be programmers and information technology people, but to be whatever it is they're going to be, because there's not a job out there right now that doesn't require technology. Right. And a lot of the kids in the neighborhood that I live in and I volunteer in, they were not getting technology. And I just saw it as something that was important as reading and writing and math, and that they were going to be left behind in college, even though they would get to college. They would be left behind because they didn't have these skills.
So what is the core mission of TAF, of the Technology Access Foundation?
What we're doing is we're providing technical training, critical thinking, problem-solving skills to kids of color so that they can be successful in whatever career they choose.
And what are some of your core programs?
We have 3 core programs. The first one is Tech Start, and it's for our 5 to 12-year-olds. And there what we're doing is we're using technology as a vehicle to enhance reading, math, communications, problem solving, and critical thinking, and information synthesis skills. It's an after-school program. The kids come 2 days a week, an hour each visit, and they work on projects, and they just happen to use technology to get these projects done. They're working on budgets, they're working on fun math problems, reading. We record their voice, they can hear themselves read, they write, and in the process they're learning how to use the computer as a tool. The second program we have is called the Technical Teens Internship Program, and that's the program that people know most about because it's the first one we started. And essentially what it is we're taking teens and giving them technical training and paid summer internships in the field of technology in the areas of network engineering, media production, programming, and web development. They come twice a week, 3 hours each visit. They work on projects twice a year, month-long projects. They get a $1,000 scholarship at the end of their internship, and they can keep coming back until they graduate high school. This program has been very successful. We've had over 110 kids have been out in, these are kids of color, have been out in the information technology field, and in many places we're doubling the population of people of color in a company. And we have 55 kids in college. That represents 100% of our seniors who have been with us. And we're going to see our first graduates this June. So we're really excited about it. The third program is our Higher Ed Bound program, and that actually became official last year. And essentially, we started that program because we were spending all this time working with these teenagers on their technical skills, and we needed to make sure they were ready for college. They were taking all the wrong high school classes. So here they had these great technical skills, but they're taking lower level math classes and general classes, so they're not able to get into the colleges that we think they should be in and they think they should be in to pursue a technical career. So we work with them on everything from SAT prep to writing that essay to get into college, picking the right college, and looking for scholarships. And for us on the staff, we have to kind of recognize that it's a part-time job. In the 70s, when I was applying for college, you sent in your application fee, your SATs, and you didn't have to write an essay. You didn't have to do anything. They either took you or they didn't. Now it's like a part-time job. You have to look for money. You got to put this portfolio together. You got to do the college visits and all that stuff. And so we work with our kids on that, and we also help them choose the right classes to take.
What has surprised you most in the 6 years since starting the foundation?
I think the biggest surprise is how much the kids don't know in terms of basics. As we spend a lot of time on that critical thinking, problem solving right in the beginning. Some of the fundamental things that I think they should be learning in school, but they're not. The other thing that kind of surprises me is that we have more girls in our program. We have we were at 70%. I think we've gone down to about 65% now. And I learned that it's that group of kids that we're going after. The boys want to be Michael Jordan. They want to be Emmitt Smith. They want to be something other than businessman USA, So we're not seeing them come through the door as much as we would like to.
How would you describe your management style?
I'm pretty hands-off. I'm very clear with people that I'm not the kind of manager that's going to groom someone and, to a level of, really teaching them step by step. That you have to be a really motivated person and a person that I can say, here, this is the assignment, these are the parameters, go figure it out. And you can always come back to ask questions, but I'm not that person that's going to step somebody through it. I think that there are times that I can be pretty demanding, but for the most part, I try to make sure that we're on eye to eye on whatever it is we're trying to do. I do accept failure because I don't think you learn unless you fail. But I don't think that it's a good thing to fail at the same thing over and over again. So that's where we might have an issue. I think I'm pretty easygoing. But you really have to ask the staff because they're really the ones who know. Our team can tell you pretty much to a person how they feel about my relationship with them, and everybody's different. I have some of my staff that would say that they look and see what kind of mood I'm in so they can know what kind of questions to ask, particularly when we had our two little kids and I was really tired coming in. It's like, don't ask Trish this kind of question because she didn't get any sleep last night. So you just, you would definitely have to ask them.
Tell us about an important aspect of success that you found was hard to learn.
In some ways, I think it's accepting that you are successful. That people keep saying I'm successful, but I keep looking at myself as a work in progress. I've done a lot of good things, and I'm really proud of that, but there's so much more. Like, I have all these ideas of things that I want to do, and that I won't really be finished until I get to do at least half of them. I might not live long enough to do them, but as long as I can get half of them done, then I would be successful. Yeah.
Within the professional arena, as we've talked about, you're on a minority on many levels. And how do you think that that's affected your career overall?
I'm sure it's had a major effect. Personally and in terms of opportunity that's been out there. I look at people who are my age and who have done some things that I probably could have done if I had had access to the same information. If I had somebody, even though I had a lot of people in my corner, I had people in my corner who had nothing. And, you know, did everything they could versus having somebody in your corner that has all the opportunities and who could open all those right doors for you. I think that my career was impacted, but I think that I'm happy with where I'm at. I'm happy with what I've done. And I think that I've gotten a lot done with the little resources that were available.
And which aspect of your minority status has created the most challenges for you?
I don't know. It's hard. I think probably being African American. Yeah, because women have made great strides over time in, you know, almost every industry. You see now, finally, women CEOs of Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies. But, well, there are 2 African American men right now that are head of companies. But, you know, there should be more. There should be more. So, yeah, I think being African American. Yeah.
What advice do you have for the minority students here that are hoping to get into senior management someday?
I'd say that I have a lot more hope for your generation than I do for mine. And to get as much information as you can about everything that you can and get mentors. Even though they may not be formal mentors, there were a lot of people that I watched what they were doing and how they were doing it. But try to find that person who's going to be the advocate for you. And it doesn't have to be a person that looks like you. It could be anybody. It could be somebody that you aspire to be or somebody that has the connection that you want. You don't want to use those people, but you want to, you know, build a real friendship with those people because it's really about who you know, about knowing where the opportunity is. In this day and age, everybody has the information all at the same time, but you have to know what to do with the information, and that's where people come in. That's where they will guide you. And get A's. Please get A's. Do not be happy with B's. Get A's. It does matter. And get internships and do all the right stuff. Don't be complacent. Don't get over, you know, and, you know, be happy that you got that certificate in the end. You have to do everything that's out there.
What is your greatest hope for the Technology Access Foundation?
My greatest hope is that we reach thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids throughout this country. My hope is that when all is said and done, 10, 20 years from now, all of the, or most of, the people of color in management can say that they had some connection to Taft, that they were a Taft kid, you know, when they were 5 years old. That would be something. You know, to say that we had an effect like that would be absolutely amazing.
Where does your drive come from?
My drive comes from, I think, my mother. I think that, and it's always been that way. You know, it's like I cannot fail because I have my mother and her siblings and all her relatives that worked so hard to make sure that I got to college, even though none of them even got out of elementary school. That made sure that I always had food in my stomach and clothes on my back and everything they can possibly give me to succeed. And, you know, I've done some stupid things in my life. I really have. But every time I wake up and realize it, it's because I think about them. And that's what drives me. I am my mother's child. I'm truly my mother's child. I'm doing things a little differently. You know, we gave through the church and all that. But, you know, I am not a religious person, so I can't give that way. But I'm giving in the new high-tech, you know, 2000 way. But it's still, you know, when you map it, you know, we're so much alike, so much alike.
Since Trish has so much love for children and the children she's worked with, I've decided to give the final work to somebody who worked with her and started within her organization. I've known Trish since 1998 when I started working for Taft as an intern. Trish was the perfect person to introduce the IT culture to me. She has been in the industry long enough to know what it really takes to succeed and how to protect yourself from being taken advantage of. Through Trish's example, I have learned not only about technology, but also about focusing on core competencies without straying too far from the mission statement. But almost more important, she gave me the confidence and assurance that I could succeed as an IT professional. She provided guidance and vision, and then allowed me to take care of the details and to put my own influence on the organization. She definitely gives people the room to grow. Trish is like the big sister we all need.